To the cloud. Okay, so I think that's working. Welcome everybody to Discovering Buddhism. This is week 2 of how to meditate. In the first module we've looked at the mind and its potential for happiness, its potential for suffering. As you as the creator, I keep saying it's up to you in Buddhism. You are the kind of the creator. We don't talk about a creator so much in Buddhism in the sense that theistic religions do, but you are empowered to provide the experiences that you want, the happiness or the elimination of suffering. And that is a really important message we hear in Discovering Buddhism as we go along and all the Buddhist teachings. And how to do that is, with meditation. So we have to kind of just know a bit about what meditation is, and then how we adjust those experiences that we create, and how we deal with the ones that we've created already, and how we, if you want happy experiences in the future, how we create those. And then once you've got the formula, once you know the system, then it's just a case of applying it, right? Easy enough. So meditation covers a few different things, but basically it's a training of the mind. And we're becoming familiar with positive states of mind. We're becoming familiar with the negative states of mind and how they affect us, and we're just adjusting that balance. Does anybody remember what we talked about last week when we talked about the Tibetan word for meditation? It was a 3-letter word.
Gom.
Gom, good, yeah. And Adita, what does Gom mean?
To familiarize.
Familiarize, okay, good. Demi, can you give me an example of that on the spot? Becoming familiar with something in meditation. We give it a simple example.
Would it say be becoming familiar with a certain feeling or emotion? Thinking about it, feeling how it feels.
Very nice, good, exactly, yeah. Yeah, so for example, if you wanted to generate more compassion for those people who are suffering around us, and perhaps even compassion for those people who we find difficult to be with, it's sometimes difficult, right, to care for those people who make life difficult for us. It's easy to generate compassion for those people who do things nice to us, our family and friends, but if it turns and we see them as harmful in some way, then to generate a positive mind for those beings is tricky. So if we become more familiar with the mind of compassion, then eventually it will know those boundaries of who helps or who harms. It'll just be unanimous. Whoever needs help and support, we'll be able to generate a mind of compassion for them. So by becoming familiar with compassion, it will kind of become stronger and stronger and become more universal. So that's an excellent example of that. So without further ado then, let's look at some of the, let's start the session here. But first of all, we're going to start with, as usual, as our motivation, a short meditation on refuge and bodhicitta. And then, well, as usual, I'll do some slides and a little explanation of this week's topics, have a little discussion in the middle, finish with a bit of feedback, and then the dedication. So let's just set a good posture for the body to work with us for the next few moments. Wherever you are at home, what we're trying to do is a posture that's going to keep us awake at this time of night, and then also keep us relaxed. Yeah. So as meditators, we have to kind of find a middle way between being too relaxed, because then we'll fall asleep, or being too intense and alert, because then we'll just get nervous and anxious and distracted. So we're trying to find a balance between those two. And that'll just come with practice. Just keep doing it and you'll find a way with it. So the best posture elements out of the 7 we talked about last week is the straight back. That helps a lot. So wherever you are, just spend a couple of moments doing that. And as usual, I suggest you take 3 long, deep breaths in and out through the nose. And then the meditation that we're going to start with here is about refuge and bodhicitta. And this is about generating some positive minds at the beginning of the class together, so that the karma we create is colored or motivated by that. The actions we do will be motivated by the minds we're creating. So therefore, the power of those karmic seeds will bring us happiness in the future. And refuge is the first two lines of this verse, and bodhicitta is the second two lines. And this is a common way that Buddhists would start any activity, generating these two minds, refuge and bodhicitta. So there are modules in Discovering Buddhism on those two minds, but here we're just going to do a brief meditation on those, an analytical meditation. So for a Buddhist, the refuge objects, or the place you kind of hold your trust and confidence in, is the Buddha as the teacher, the Dharma as the teachings, and the Sangha as those beings who generated wisdom, realizing interest directly, those beings who are not quite Buddhas, but really a great support for our practice. And also, I think about these three jewels, often called three jewels, is the inner version of these. So we take refuge in the Buddha that we are going to become in the future, a confidence and conviction that that is a way for happiness. We take confidence and trust in the minds of compassion and wisdom, all the minds of the Lamrim, as our real refuge. And the Sangha, the being with direct realization, emptiness, and compassion that we're going to have at some point in the future. So because things are out of our control, in the external world at least, and when negative karma ripens for us, we can't do much about it at that particular moment. We do kind of take safety in those three jewels as a way to support difficulties we experience. Not only in this life, but we think ahead to future lives. We don't want the suffering in future lives either. And if we're creating causes for those experiences now, well, it's really important we think about that, right? Can't leave it till the next lives to deal with if the causes of that is right now. So we can also have a concern as a Buddhist for the future experiences of suffering and happiness. And the second two lines are then widening that experience out to others with compassion then for all beings suffering, this life and future life suffering of all living beings, friends, enemies, and strangers. You kind of take them into your heart and your mind and think, the best way I can help these beings is by becoming the perfect version of myself, spiritually evolved to such a degree that you will have all the tools necessary to help, which is what a Buddha is. So then you take on the responsibility to liberate all living beings by yourself becoming a Buddha, moved by this compassion, this concern for others' welfare. So both of these minds are stemmed in a kind of concern for suffering and liberation from that suffering. One is for yourself and the other is for all living beings. So I'm going to recite the verse 3 times in Tibetan. Feel free to join me if you like, otherwise you can just listen and generate those minds as we go on. Sangye churang soke chonam la chanchu badu dadni kapsuchi daye chanyangi basanam di jala penche sangye japasho Sangye churang soke chanam la Janchu badu dadni kapsuchi Dagi chenyengi pesanangi jala penche sangi drupasho. Sangi chirang saki chanama janchu badu dani kapsuchi. Dagi chenyengi pesanangi jala penche sangi drupasho. Okay, thank you, everybody. We're going to talk a little bit about motivation in the slides today. So we're going to come back to that. But here's just a reminder of what we're doing during this course. So week one is last week is a little bit what meditation is. And we also went through the 7-point posture, if you remember. Does anyone remember any of those 7 from last week?
Legs, arms, back.
Good. Those 3 are the kind of the real physical ones we started to kind of ground ourselves. The legs, thinking about the position, the back, and the arms. What about the legs, John? Where are the legs?
Hopefully, if you can do it in the lotus position.
Yes, but not many people are able to do that, actually. Yeah.
But I suspect it depends. I sit in a chair, so I have my feet on the floor. You know, some people
good.
Sort of fold them over.
Yeah. And then there are kind of 4 that are to do with the upper part of the body. So what are they? Anyone have any of those?
Your
Demi?
tongue.
Say again, Demi?
The tongue.
The tongue, good. That must be on the roof of the mouth, stop us swallowing so much. Yeah. What else?
Head.
What about the head?
Should be slightly forward.
Yeah, a good position.
Double chin.
Bringing chins, as I said last week. I don't think the Buddha mentioned double chins, but you know, it's just, yeah. And then, oh, good. 2 more then. What else?
Eyes.
Eyes. What about the eyes, Demi?
You can have them closed, but ideally, if you can learn to meditate with them open, it's better.
Great. Good. Yeah. That's a nice one to practice. Is anyone trying that? With
Yeah.
eyes open. Yeah. It's not so easy, is it, in the beginning? Because you tend to get distracted by what's happening on the floor or patterns on the walls, etc. So you really have to focus inwards to take yourself away from observing what's happening on the outside. We do it all the time, as I said before. It's possible to daydream, be looking outside the window, but you're not paying any attention, not giving it any awareness, and the internal work is what you're focused on. So we do that. But to do it in, as I say, in a focused, prescribed way is not so easy for beginners. But if we can learn to do that, as I say, the advice is it's really beneficial. Right? Good. And then one more.
Jaw and mouth.
Good. Yeah. So you want to have the jaw nice and relaxed with the lips closed, breathing through the nose. Yeah. Very good. Excellent. So that was week 1. Week 2, then we're going to look at being aware, mindfulness, introspection, motivation, and dedication. That's this week's topics. Week 3, we're going to focus on the 2 types of meditation. And then week 4, using meditation to deal with disturbing emotions. That's an important one. Week 5, visualization and mantra recitation. We're going to do, that's like another way to use the mind to create positive karma and visualize ourselves and things around us as something different to help create karma, positive karma. And week 6 is some practical steps. We look at practical steps all the way through, but then that session will be specifically about how to establish a daily practice. And that is already a module coming up for DB, but it's just kind of a bridge into that. Yeah, good. All right then, so this week's topics. Here's a quote from Lama Zopa. I should just read out in case you can't read it. Buddhist meditation doesn't necessarily mean sitting cross-legged with your eyes closed. Shock. Simply observing how your mind is responding to the sense world can be a really perfect meditation and bring a perfect result. So we're talking about all that posture and meditation, and then Lama says, well, it's not necessarily meditation. So we do in the morning, perhaps that's when our meditation practices, if we're establishing one, we do that in the morning. And then what we're trying to do at that point, or in the retreat situation, is have all the conducive conditions for meditation, gathering them all together in a really specific way so that we can make things as easy as possible to meditate. So posture is definitely one of those. The posture is going to be really easy to meditate. But if you're sat on the bus or on a train or in the car somewhere, well, maybe not when you're driving. Meditate when you're driving, not a good idea. But you could be doing meditation during the day when you're not in that posture, because if it's just about being aware of what's happening in your mind and what you're responding to the external world with, different emotions, etc., then that is also meditation, becoming familiar, right? And especially, that's a real practice, is when you get pushed around by your karma, your negative karma, and you're likely to respond in ways that are unhelpful. If you could adjust that and respond back, fight back with compassion or kindness, then you've really changed. Then you're really practicing Buddhism at that point. That's really special meditation. You saw what was happening in the situation. You saw what the sense world was bringing you, the different things. When Rinpoche mentions sense world, we're talking about physical things that happen through the eyes, through the body, etc. Words people say to us, etc. I'm responding to that in a positive way, which will bring us positive results, of course. So that's just to mention, sometimes I've heard Lama, like Geshe Tashi, for example, he's often said that, the morning session when you're meditating is preparation. The real practice is in the day. So I've mentioned that quite a lot, I think, in these classes. If we're practicing Buddhism, it's like the meditation is the rehearsal, becoming familiar with those minds so that when you need them during the day, you can bring them, just the click of the fingers. You've rehearsed so well that you know what you're doing. Welcome, Stuart, who's just joined us. Nice to see you. We've just been recapping, Stuart, till you got here. So now we can start. You're here.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Sorry about the delay.
You're very welcome. Okay, let's go on to the first slide. So I'd like to cover a few topics today. One of them is motivation and dedication. So we've already done it at the beginning, but I think in this module it's helpful to explore that in detail, because that's going to come up. We're going to be doing motivation dedications all the way through Discovering Buddhism. And you'll probably find that in most Buddhist situations, there's motivation and dedication for events, especially teachings like this. And often that first verse that we use is the most common one to use as a motivation. We don't have to use that verse. If you're already a bodhisattva and generated minds of great compassion and wisdom, you could do your own special motivation with bodhicitta, with the view of emptiness mixed in there. That would be fantastic motivation. You don't need the verse. But for us, we need some steps, some guidelines, some kind of bullet points to generate that mind. And there's different levels of motivation, right? Motivation just means why. Why we do something. We often talked about it in the acting world. I had something to do with the world of show business when I was younger. Did a music degree in London way back when. There was always one of the jokes about actors is, what is my motivation? Why is this character doing this? And to take this craft seriously, it's very helpful, of course. I'm not criticizing that, but we used to take the mick out of the actors a little bit as musicians. But it's really important, actually. We came back to it in Buddhism in the end, so I came around to it in the end. Anyway, we can just be, most of the time, if we're not thinking about it, the default will be just for here and now, or maybe a day or two's benefit. That's about as far as we go by default. Honestly, the motivation is to make ourselves happy and avoid suffering, but the time scale in which we do that is quite limited. We have to check. Don't just believe what I'm saying. Check it out. we're certainly not on the whole thinking about next life. Did anybody think about creating a positive action for next life today? Consciously? Don't think I did. I was mainly just thinking about how many day and what I need to prepare for lockdown and blah, blah, blah. What I need to do for Thursday. Interesting, right? So that's where if we're not kind of guided by our teachers and the texts and the Buddhist teachings to think about these things, we tend to just fall into here and now, the immediate. We're not thinking about the bigger picture. And the way that these lamas and teachers often help us is by thinking, well, this life is only just a brief moment. You need to think about the future where the majority of the time is. Does that make sense? That becomes a module in DB as well, death and rebirth at some point in the future. So we can think about ourselves as a motivation. May we be happy and free from suffering. That's a positive, great motivation. But if it's just for this life and just for right near and now, it's not so profound. Everyone can do that. In fact, that's the deal. Everyone does that already. Even your cat will do that. Think about here and now, happiness, when it can get its next meal, when it can get into the warm, etc. So we're no different from animals if we're only thinking like that. We have something much more special in the animal realm. We have much more intelligence and the ability to think into the future. So that would be a bit of waste, I would suggest, if we're only thinking that level. If you could think about the future levels, next life, it's a bit hard. I keep mentioning next life, but maybe we don't believe in next lives, but I'm mentioning it because this is a Buddhist course, of course. Not that you should just believe it because I'm saying it, but because the system requires that we think about it. The system of Buddhism, Buddha taught, has to have that in its equations. Yeah. And then that was only think about ourselves. We can think about liberating ourselves and suffering, but then what about everyone else? So another level of motivation will be, I'm doing these practices to help others. And that's what those last two lines of that motivation verse were at the beginning, moving it from just myself to actually all the infinite other living beings. And then dedication is there, the other part, the other end of the practice, where you created all those positive karmic seeds in your mind, and then you dedicate them for the best thing possible, which is full enlightenment for all living beings. Again, the bodhicitta, right? To become fully enlightened. By that point, you've got a substance to actually invest with. Yeah. At the beginning, you didn't create it. At the beginning, you're just speculating. But then over the hour and a half, if you're doing a class, for example, or meditation, you've got something to invest. We're talking in financial terms. So you can choose who to put your investment with. So you've got substance at that point. So the dedication and motivation are different, but you need both, right? A dedication, you've got something, a motivation, you're creating something. Yeah. So there's the two elements that we important to remember. So these are three levels of motivation that are often mentioned, especially when we talk about Lam Rim. If you've seen our newsletter this month, we're renaming November Lam Rim Month. Forget a lockdown month, we're doing Lam Rim Month. That's much more helpful focus for us. Especially as Geshe Jampal from Nalanda Monastery, the abbot, is going to be teaching tomorrow night on the Lam Rim, the very first Lam Rim text called Lamp on the Path by Lama Atisha. So if you can join for that, that's going to be a stunning class. And the Lam Rim was created by Lama Atisha, as I said, and he divided the Buddhist teachings into these three levels of motivation, three levels that beings are working for. The first level is to work for future life's happiness. The second level was to work for liberation from samsara completely, the cycles of suffering. And the third level is to work for full enlightenment, all living beings. Those first two levels are just to get yourself out of difficulty. The third level there is for all living beings. It's going in stages, right? That's a big topic, those three levels of motivation. I'm just introducing it here because I think it's important with all the Lam Rim that's coming up. And Lama Zopa, for example, calls his first level the lower capable being. Lower capable being, sometimes called small scope, same thing, just a different way of saying it. Only working for the happiness of future lives. So even that first level is probably not even where we are. We're not even there on the first level. Well, I'm not, I can't speak for you. And then the second level is to liberate ourselves from all of samsara completely, all the suffering, all the seeds of ignorance, and ignorance has been completely removed. No more delusions. You're completely free of samsara. You are liberated forever. You won't ever go back. But you haven't reached full enlightenment yet. So that's an important distinction to make, which we'll come to. And that's the middle scope, or the middle capable being, who's working for liberation from samsara, for oneself. If we're a brave being, then we might, like a bodhisattva, bodhicitta, then we'll be working for the full enlightenment for all living beings. And that's like encompassing all suffering, taking that as a responsibility to eliminate and bring all living beings to enlightenment. Yeah, I'm skipping through that a little bit quickly, I realize, but is that familiar to some of you, or is that completely new to some of you? Any questions about that? I'll take the silence so that you understand everything or understand nothing. As one of my teachers says. Okay, good. Moving on then. And when Geshe Jampo teaches tomorrow night, he may mention these three scopes and how teachers put them in his text. Let's see. So let's move on to a topic of being aware. So one of the kind of the elements of meditation is that you start to notice what's going on in your minds. You start to see what's going on. Maybe you don't want to, I don't know, but you start to see what's going on there. You start to see the thoughts, you start to see the emotions, you start to see how you're reacting, you start to see what you're projecting. And maybe you've never met, all this internal world before. So it can be quite a challenge for people who start to meditate. I remember when I started meditating in my mid-20s at Jamang, London, and some of the other Buddhist centers in London. I remember being quite shocked because I kind of thought there's so much going on in my mind that I'd never seen before. It felt like I just discovered I've got like some terminal illness or something. I remember saying to somebody, it feels like I've got cancer suddenly. I've just discovered, because there's so much going on in here that I wasn't aware of, that causing me distress day to day. I didn't actually know it was there. And that's an important step, because when we look at the Four Noble Truths, the first one is to be able to identify that there's something going on before you can fix it. If you don't know it's there, then you won't be looking for the causes for that to eliminate them. Yeah. Sometimes you hear from people who are beginning to meditate that meditation is making me worse, they'll say. Meditation is making me more anxious, more crazy. But it's not that. It's just the case that now they're starting to see for the first time what's going on in the mind. They might be a bit shocked by that, but they're starting to see for the first time what the internal world is like. We're aware of it to some extent, but we're usually only aware of it when it gets like really gross, really intense, obvious levels. Like when you're screaming and shouting at somebody, or you've got your hand around somebody's neck, strangling them, you might think, oh, it appears I'm a little bit angry. Hopefully we're not at that stage, but you understand my point. We didn't see way back, in the process that already we were a little bit uneven throughout the day. Things weren't going well for us, and we kind of had this little uncomfortable anxiety, or this unfulfilled, nervousness kind of hanging about in the background, and we didn't notice it was there, and we didn't deal with it, and it kind of escalated and escalated, and before we know it, we're shouting and screaming at somebody, completely unrelated to what it was that caused our snowball to escalate in the first place. So it's an important step to become aware of what's going on in our mind. And actually some meditations that we did in the Monday night course that Lynn just led, How to Meditate, was about just understanding what was going on in the mind, just spending time listening to your mind and seeing what's going on. Sometimes when you stop and stare at it, kind of like the mind suddenly goes quiet. But, we don't have to wait too long before it starts up again. Yeah. So that little bit of the mind that's checking what's going on is a really important mental muscle that we need to work out. We need to get really strong with that muscle. That's a really important meditator's tool. And that's what I called in this last bullet point there, introspection. Well, I didn't call it. It was, you know, great translators have assigned that, that English word there to a Tibetan word. I did speak a bit of Tibetan, but it's mostly gone now. So I don't know what the Tibetan word is. So that's the part of the mind that checks. And in terms of meditation, it's checking what the mind is on, what the mind is focused on. When we say what the mind is on, the object, it's like basically means what you're focused on, what the mind is full of. And then mindfulness in the Buddhist context is the part of the mind that holds its awareness on the object itself. We talked a bit about this in the last module, a bit about Buddhist psychology. Like the Buddhists divided the mind into different functions, and these are two of the functions of the mind that we need to think about here as meditators. As yogis, we're all trainee yogis. Yoginis is the female version, right? And it's interesting to think about that because, you know, in India, for example, where this tradition started, Buddhism started, even before the Buddha was around, there was a real strong tradition of ascetics, or, you know, wandering mendicants, people wandering around in the forest naked. It was hot enough there, obviously, to just have a really austere lifestyle from our point of view, with food and drink, just to work on the internal world. And they were really respected, and they still are actually today. You can still see them, less and less, of course, in India, but you still see them wandering around in just a robe or next to nothing. And they're really respected by the Indian population as yogis, or kind of, you know, sages, quite wise people who spent their lives looking in the internal world. Mostly Hindus, probably, not Buddhists. Yeah, so to what end they're doing that, you know, it's different, obviously, but here we're trying to use it as a part of our Buddhist spiritual path. And meditation doesn't have to be Buddhist, right? Meditation can be Christian or Islam. It could be humanist. It could be pagan. You know, it could be just secular, which is, I think, partly what the part of the mindfulness movement. You know, to make meditation in a secular context helpful for people who are not ready for the future life step. Yeah, so digress a little bit there. So the whole point of Buddhist meditation then is to shift the balance between negative to the positive. In a nutshell, right? We have the mind itself is like the seed for full awakening, full happiness, full enlightenment is there in its nature. It's right here with us. And all we have to do is remove all the garbage, all the pollution, which is the afflictive emotions, the wrong views, and the seeds of those wrong views, so that it don't keep generating. Once we can remove those wrong views and the seeds, that's it, we've cleaned the mind. And if we can remove all the imprints of those, like a third level, we have the kind of impressions of those that are left in the mind. Once those have gone, then we're fully enlightened. So it's just a cleaning job. But that indicates, right, if that's true, then it means that the nature in itself is already, you know, everything is there already. You don't need to bring anything else into it, into the process to become fully enlightened. You've got everything there already. So adjusting the balance is about our level. It's about becoming aware, at least, of what suffering and the difficulties are in the mind. And pushing and kind of unlearning or becoming unfamiliar, in a sense, with the negative ones, and becoming more familiar with the positive ones, adjusting the balance. Yeah. So the positive ones are becoming stronger, working out those muscles, working out those so they become really strong. And you're letting go of the weak, letting go of the kind of anger and the jealousy and the pride as much as you can, so they become weaker, so they don't arise as quickly. Yeah. So you're deciding, if I was going to the gym and I was going to be doing a lot of running, I would go to a personal trainer. He would say to me, okay, you need to work this muscle, the legs. You don't need to worry about the body so much. We need to work the legs, you need to work a bit of core, maybe you do this, that, and the other. And you give me a precise plan of which muscles to work out for my goal. If I then went and just did weights on my arms or my neck, I'm not going to do very well in the marathon, I would suggest. That's all we're doing in Buddhism. We're kind of working out which are the minds, the ones we want to develop, which one of the muscles you want for your goal, whichever of those 3 motivations you're working for, right? Then you make those stronger and stronger. And by that, you let the other ones go and they become weaker and weaker. And eventually when you have the wisdom realizing emptiness directly, then you've got the actual tool, the mind, which will blast the negative seeds out of existence. And then that spirals into liberation and full enlightenment. But it all starts from where we are here. It all starts from becoming aware of what's going on. First noble truth, identifying. Now, without that, the rest of the sequences don't work. That's why the Buddha was very clever in identifying how the mind of humans work. You know, to identify the difficulties first and what they're caused by. Any questions so far? Okay then, why don't we look at some discussion points then? How many people are we today? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that's enough for 2 groups then. We'll do 2 breakout groups. And I want to just talk a little bit about meditation, our own experience of meditation so far today. What is your experience of meditation? How is it going? Did you try the breathing meditation last week? Did anyone try that? That was your challenge, should you choose to accept. And that was the challenge there, was just to focus on the breath for a few moments, once a day perhaps, or whenever, and use that as your object. So the object, you know that word again, object, the object was the breath in that case. So that's what you were focusing on. That's where the mindfulness was. That's where the introspection was checking, am I on that or not? So if you've had a little go at that, then discuss that. And then leading on from that, what obstacles are you finding in that? What's causing you to be distracted or to fall asleep? Discuss some solutions together. Maybe you can share some experiences. The 2 obstacles to meditation are, well, you tell me. Does anyone know what these kind of 2 ways that meditation can go for us? Stuart?
Yeah, well, you can either, well, one of them anyway is feeling drowsy, isn't it? Feeling dull.
Yeah.
And the other one is being overexcited, isn't it? Being over.
Very good. Yeah, exactly. So obviously, if we're excited and distracted, then we're not on the object at all. So then we're not meditating. We're not becoming familiar with the object, because you can't become familiar if you're not actually on it. You're becoming familiar with distraction, maybe you could say. You're definitely not becoming familiar with the object you've chosen. And the other one is that you might be holding the object, but you're kind of falling into it or sleepy. If you fall asleep, then obviously you're not on the object at all, right? So then it's gone. So that's the fine line we're walking between as meditators, as yogis, yoginis, is trying to keep alert. And if you're interested to explore calm abiding, which is Venerable Mary's retreat this weekend, you know, she might, I don't know what she'll talk about. She might talk about these different levels that you go through to develop concentration, calm abiding mind. And the first stages of calm abiding are about not becoming distracted, trying to stay on the object. And then the later ones about trying to keep focused and have some clarity on the object. Geshe Tashi, interesting enough, when Geshe Tashi used to say stability and clarity as the 2 kind of characteristics of meditation, calm abiding especially. But then he changed his word now, which is interesting, because Geshe Tashi is great because he's studied English long enough to know all the words that are really helpful for us, and he's got all this wealth of Tibetan knowledge and translation behind him. So when he changes his translation, I'm always keen to know why. And he's now saying, he says stillness and clarity. Interesting. Stillness, being able to hold the object still in the mind. And then the clarity, that object has to be really sharp and clear. Anyway, here are your discussion points then. I'm going to pause the recording now, so feel free to chat without worrying about being recorded. One moment. Okay, so welcome back everybody from our discussion groups. And this week's discussion point was just about becoming familiar with your own practice, really. Just figuring out, just chatting about how it's going, your meditation practice, some of the obstacles, any solutions. Anybody want to give any feedback on what you've experienced in your meditation, how it's going? Did anybody try the breathing meditation in particular?
Yeah.
How did that go then? Anybody want to?
Yeah, it was good.
Sorry, you
Go on, Demi.
I was just going to say, I find focusing on breathing as the object one of the easier things, really. So I think I can group it together. So I tend to focus on my stomach expanding, going back
Great.
in. Also, the sound, I know that I breathe a lot heavier so that I can almost hear it. I don't know why.
Yeah.
I do. But yeah, I find that having those two main things to focus on tends to really keep me engaged, whereas if I try to picture something, it's easier for my mind to wander.
Yeah. Good. Yeah. John, what were you going to say?
Same as Demi, really. I was talking to Demi, and I've meditated for a bit, but up until recently, in fact, up until now, it's always been with my eyes closed. So meditating with my eyes open is a completely new thing for me. And I was mentioning it to Demi, and one of the things that I've realised is the same as Demi. For some reason, with my eyes open, it's easier for me to focus on my breath than it was with my eyes closed. I can focus on an image with my eyes closed a lot easier, but with my eyes open, I think it's the breathing. I think because it's more physical, that I can focus on the breath. And again, as Demi was saying, especially if you're feeling it in your abdomen or your chest expanding. But certainly with my eyes open, it's been a whole new experience, really.
Maggie, do you meditate with eyes open or closed?
With my eyes closed, yeah. But I asked, what I was saying was, because I've tried to do the different kinds of meditation, either meditation that you've learned on one course or another, or in yoga, or and I'm always so delighted when I actually get into a place to meditate and I've got everything sort of ready. And I almost feel sort of then like complacent, like, well, wow, I've got here, this is it, job done, and I'm ready, you know, and I have a timer, and I'm thinking the timer's going to move on, and that's great, and I'll get to the end of it because I've done it, because I've done it, and of course that's rubbish, and you know, but I think I must get very agitated, really, and you know, because I'm thinking I can go on to the next thing now. I can go walk the dog, or I'm chilled. I'm not going to get, you know, I'm all ready and sorted, and I'm not, possibly not. but on the positive,
Yeah, but you're doing it, aren't you? You're actually doing the practice. Which is,
yes, I suppose that, yeah, and I've been, you know, yeah, for lots of, yeah, trying, or yeah,
exactly. That's all we're doing, just trying. Right?
Yeah, okay.
I think that was something similar that we spoke about, how sometimes when you're meditating, it can be just to relax and unwind, and then focusing on actually being proactive and focusing on emotions and how we're feeling and having a motivation now is new. I think before, like you said, Kerry, it can just be daydreaming and relaxing. And is it really meditating? I didn't realise that when I'm just going for a walk down the river during the day and I'm thinking about how I'm feeling and what's going on, that really I'm meditating then, which I wouldn't have thought of.
Yeah, good. Yeah, because as we'll talk about next a week or the week after, there is like a meditation where you're just focused on a non-analytical object like the breath. You're not thinking thoughts or kind of stages of a path when you're looking at the breath or visualizing an object. And the other types of meditation where you're thinking very clearly about some steps to generate a specific result. So meditation falls into those two categories, generally speaking. But they're both really important: introspection, to see what's happening in our internal world. Yeah.
I think I worked out that I'm at the opposite end to Maggie in terms of I tend to I've found myself a few times almost nodding off. I went to the lunchtime meditation session today, and I caught myself a few times where I'd almost fallen asleep. So I think that's the opposite end to sort of having lots of thoughts and things. But I was also saying in our group that one meditation technique that I do find really helpful is a 10-minute walking meditation, which I try and do every day.
Yeah, very nice. One of the course descriptions for today's session would be to do walking meditation, but obviously we haven't got space to do that. So, maybe when we do the course the next year, the year after, we'll do some walking meditation. Adita, what about meditating with eyes open or closed? What works for you?
So I have been meditating with my eyes open for a while with Tai Chi. But I think I realized that it was like wandering. The thoughts will just go off, and the film will be shooting, and I'll be watching whenever it's happening. Whereas when I started doing the breathing, I found it difficult because I count to 10 and I'm off. I don't even count to 10. It will be one breath, second breath, 2, 3, 5, and off I'm go, thinking about what I'm going to eat or what I'm going to do. So actually bringing the mind, although it's hard work at the moment, I found it much more useful rather than sitting for 20, half an hour, minutes and watching my own film. So it's very interesting. It's very interesting for me to see that, because I thought, it's calm, it's okay, I'm meditating.
We often know our own predispositions. Some of us are very very relaxed, very easygoing. Some of us are kind of on the sleepy, drowsy scale. Some of us are kind of the other end, are kind of a bit hyper, and to meditate, sat still, watching our breath, it's just like the hardest thing in the universe. So you have to know your own propensities. Not that you can't train either of those skills in or out, just useful to know where you are. And then you find meditations that work for you. I think that's really important. Analytical meditations are fairly prescribed. The Buddha generated these minds and said this is how you generate them too. But non-analytical meditations, I think they can be much more flexible. And the watching the breath meditation is just specifically for people who think too many busy thoughts, who are trying to calm the mind. And that seems to be quite common for us in our cultures, Western cultures. So that's why we always recommend that one to start with. Okay, very nice. Thank you, everybody. I'm just going to restart the slides and move us on. We're going to finish with the meditation together, which is about mind like the sky. So the first step is about just preparing the body, doing a bit of calming meditation. So now we're using that breathing meditation that we did earlier as a preparation. So that meditation itself is now all included in step 1 as a preparation for step 2, whereas before it was the whole meditation. Does that make sense? So that meditation on preparing the body, watching the breath, that is a preparation step for then leaping into a more cognitive or a more analytical process. And that's often how teachers, masters, would describe it as, it's like you're preparing the platform, a space on which to then build some, more complex structures. So you need that space, that stability, Geshe says that stillness and clarity to be able to build on. Without that, things are going to get messy. And the meditation itself is number 2. Our minds are clear and aware, spacious like the sky. So here identifying our minds as like the sky. So the idea is that when thoughts and kind of emotions are kind of taking over, if we think about negative emotions specifically, then we can visualize those as like, you know, dark clouds kind of crowding the blue sky, so we can't get any space. You know, but the blue sky, the nature of the entity of the sky is there, is clear, it's pure, it's still there, but just kind of temporarily blocked, right? And just like the clouds are kind of coming and going, those thoughts and emotions also come and go. They're not here all the time. So it's a really powerful meditation to dealing with you know, disturbing emotions and thoughts that happen in our daily life, especially when things are out of control around the world and we can't really get a grasp on things. If we can just think we have control of our minds, and these thoughts and emotions are just like passing clouds that sometimes they're quite heavy, sometimes they're very light, but either way, they're just going to pass. And our mind, we're trying to identify our mind as the kind of the space between the clouds, if you like, that clear, that endless disappearing space into the horizon, where all these thoughts and emotions happen, but they come and they go. So we don't kind of connect too closely to these negative and disturbing emotions. We keep a bit of space so then we can allow them to come and go. If we're identifying ourselves as those emotions, then there's not much room for maneuver, we're too close. If we can step back a bit and see our minds as the sky and the thoughts and emotions as the clouds, then we've got more chance to adapt and change. Yeah, so this meditation is about a way of buying into that idea that you have more control than you think. Nice thought, right? Well, let's do it. Let's just do it in the last couple of minutes then. As usual, I've run out of time. So let's just do this meditation for a few moments. I'm just going to mute everybody if you're not already muted. So a quick way to kind of balance the mind is to take those 3 breaths in and out through the nose. Let's just do that in your own time. So identifying our minds as a clear, spacious sky, and blue, everywhere you look, it kind of disappears into the horizon. Clean, clear. And when a thought or emotion arises, we just observe it like the clouds passing. So just become aware of the thoughts and emotions as they arise, but you're not getting too close to them, you're just watching as they come and they go. So watching what thoughts you're having right now, where the mind is going, and just enjoying the spacious nature of your mind. And each mental event or thought that pops up, just notice. You're not rejecting it, and you're not kind of sticking to it either and following its story. Just noticing, just observing. Like you're watching a play or a movie, sat in the audience. Just observe. Just try that for a few moments. then let's end this session with a dedication together. So here we're just going to think that any positive karmic seeds that we've been planted in our minds, because of that great motivation we had at the beginning, those seeds are very powerful. Now we have something, some substance, some means we can invest in. And the best way would be to give it away to all living beings until their full enlightenment. So it's not lost. We can't lose this, especially if we can dedicate with emptiness the view that ourselves, the action we engaged in, full enlightenment, all sentient beings, the goal we're trying to reach to are all empty of inherent existence. So may this positive karma ripen as our full awakening for all living beings. Okay, so thank you everybody. That's part 2 of how to meditate. So next week we'll do some more on the process. If you can do some practice this week of that meditation like the sky, that would be helpful. So that includes including a bit of the breathing and mind like the sky meditation. So we're covering both of those meditations we've covered so far. If you're doing this as the module, you've got your completion cards already. If you want those completion cards and want to do it as a module, just send me an email. I'll send you through the information. It requires you to do certain meditations, some reading, attend 5 out of the 6 sessions, and then we can give you a completion card for this module, and then you collect the modules, etc. to complete the course. Thank you, everybody. Enjoy the national lockdown on Thursday if you're in the UK, and we'll see you next week on Zoom. Thank you, everybody.
Hey, everybody.
Thank you very
Bye.
much. Lovely to see you all. Bye.
Everybody. See you next week.
See you next week.
See you next week.